My name is Tonda Sizwe Shimarenga. You are here on the Black Power Media platform with Rootwork. This is our Black August Study and Struggle session number 2. Whew. And today we're going to be talking about Brother Kuwasi Balagoon. Kuwasi Balagoon is a brother who has, in the last few years, probably last 20 years, has been getting, if you weren't already a comrade of his, if you weren't already a student of the Black Panther Party and the Black Liberation Army or Black radical politics, you weren't familiar with him. But in the last few years, more and more people have been talking about him. We're going to talk about him today. We're going to hear what others have said about him. We're going to hear what he has said about himself, read some of his words, hear some of his words. And our special guest today is a brother by the name of Kazembe Balogun. But before I get into all of that, again, I think you need to press the like button first, even though we ain't finished, even though we just had technical difficulties, even though somebody gonna get cussed out. Click that like button now because you might forget later on. Hit the subscribe button if you have not already subscribed. Share the link. You can share it now or you can share it later on after this is finished. But please support Rootwork, support Black Power Media, support Black Power Media on YouTube, and support them on Patreon. Also, just in case we got to get up out of here, please make sure you do all of those things today. So before we get started with our guest and his own words, let me just say real briefly, Kuwasi Balagoon, the man-child born on Sunday, the Warlord, also known as the WildChild to his comrades in the Black Panther Party in the underground, the Black Underground. He was not your average warrior in the fight for Black liberation. He's well known for his military exploits as a Black Liberation Army soldier. His sexuality, bisexuality, was an open secret amongst those who knew him. And yet, many feel that part of his life has been purposefully left out. Or has it been left out? Is there really even a need to talk about it? That's what we're going to discuss today on Rootwork here on the Black Power Media platform. So I'm going to start out with not really an overview, but semi-introduction. Basically, I'm going to play this clip from Jared Ball earlier this year, where he spoke with another Black Liberation Army veteran, Brother Ashanti Alston, asking him about his memories, what he knew of Brother Kuwasi Balagoon. So we're going to come to that and come back.
You're right.
So we had all heard stories about Kuwasi, like especially if you in that New York, New Jersey area, and I knew Ali Bey Hassan, and there was a brother named Nine, one of Kuwasi's close comrades. It just, you get these stories about how one might get locked up somewhere for something, and the others, Nine or whatever, whoever, somehow make their way over there and get them out. You know, there've been so many. I mean, sometimes we hear about prison breakouts or liberations, and it seemed like they might fail. But there's many that was just, you just get them, work it out, figure it out. And Kuwasi had stories like that around him, and other folks that was close around him who were BLA folks, and they knew each other. They grew up together and all other kind of stuff. So those were the original stories that you heard. This is, not anything yet about anarchism and all like that. I really didn't get to anarchism till I'm sitting in Lewisburg prison, and as BLA and as us trying to kind of recuperate inside the different prisons, I began to learn more about Kuwasi and his politics. But it's interesting too, because we had worked out ways to have sort of underground communications, because we had this thing that was called consolidation. We're trying to consolidate from our losses and everything, regardless, with the folks who are still outside and those of us who was in different prisons. And I come to discover that Kwesi was not among the captured at the time, but was letting folks know that he's out there with others and still able to put themselves in a position to help different captured comrades. And at the time, I'm in Lewisburg, Pennsylvania, and I know that we was constantly on efforts to get out of there. They had high walls and everything. And man, we'd be training and we'd be like, oh, we're going to have to scale them walls, or we're going to have to try to dig a tunnel under. We're going to commandeer one of them vans coming up, them trucks. Every day was an at war feeling, at war. And Deruba talks about that. You know, it's like our attitude was still, we're at war. We just captured. That don't mean it's over. You just captured. So let's figure out how to be getting out of here. And even Kwesi had sent word to us in Lewisburg, like, comrades in Philly and other places, what do you need? You know? And that was on that level. But he was also trying to develop, for folks coming out, ways to stay in touch that did not rely on a small group of individuals who was like in control. I think us coming out of that split experience, no one wanted a situation again where Huey P. Newton and his clique they have total control over what's going on, total control of the resources, the ideological thinking's going out, whatever. And so Kwesi was really clear on, like, we had to develop more autonomous units, but with strong, specific ways to stay in touch and communicate. That's what started me to thinking how he was this anarchist. I'm still Marxist, Leninist, Maoist, but I'm also reading a lot of critical theory. I'm also starting to read more feminist stuff, and just kind of getting into the anarchist, but still thinking, too idealistic, you know. But on a movement basis, he was already laying out some things that could be considered more anti-authoritarian, anarchistic. How it would eventually panned out, who knows? But with him and a few other comrades who was really critical of that Marxist-Leninist top-down hierarchy, had me move more into my curiosity. So I started reading more. Later on, things happen at Lewisburg. I get shipped to Marion, Illinois, which took the place of Alcatraz, me and another comrade. There, I met a few other comrades who was clearly anti-authoritarian. And literature, even in Marion, was coming in from Canada and other places. There was this anarchistic material from anarchist groups. And it started to clear up for me some of the confusions I had around the idealism of this anarchist stuff. That it could work, from the day-to-day organizing to the larger dreaming period in terms of a society without a state, and getting real specific with it, you know. And even so, that's when some of the writings of Martin Sostre comes in, and then some of the few things that Kwesi might have had published that was even critiquing Panthers and the broader Black nationalist movement. And it started to make sense. I did not want to be a part of anything that was going to reproduce another Huey P. Newton situation. This is why when you start to listen to Deruba specifically, Man, you can see that he's not the type. Sometimes you see the writings that are coming through. At some point, I began to pick up, I think this is Garuba writing this, because it was a critique of that whole hierarchy in the Black Panther Party, but the pointing us in some other directions to uh, be able to move in a different way.
That was a nice spiel that I just gave. Y'all missed it because my mic was on mute. What I was saying was that I'm purposefully starting out with talking about Kuwasi's quote unquote exploits, his mythology, because even people who are peripherally familiar with who he is, that's the part that they really, really know about him. And it's an important part. It needs to be talked about, but it also needs to be talked about in the full context of who he was. And again, because I'm trying not to bore y'all, I want to play you this other clip of Kuwasi. And this is coming from, let me also mention to you, I talked to Kalanji Jamachanga, who is a founder of Black Power Media. And Kalanji said I should be able to play this clip and it be no problem. So if it's a problem, it's Kalanji's fault.
The radicalization of Kuwasi Balagoon began in 1967 after his honorable discharge from the U.S. Army. For 2 years, he worked as a tenant organizer, but says he became so overwhelmed by the misery and frustration he found in New York City slums, he turned to the justice of the bomb and the gun and went underground. In 1969, he was one of the original Black Panther 21, accused of plotting the bombings of police stations, and received a long sentence in that case and the armed robbery of a New Jersey bank. He escaped from prison twice, but Balogun, then known as Donald Weems, did not reach presidential attention until October 20th, 1981, when the Black Liberation Army, of which he is a member, and remnants of the Weather Underground stole $1.6 million from a Brinks truck in Nanuet, New York. In the process, he and his comrades killed 2 police officers and a guard. One of the police officers was Black. You didn't care about those people that you killed.
No, I didn't care that much about them, everybody who got shot that day was armed. Everybody who was shot that day woke up that morning with the realization that they might get shot that day or have to shoot somebody that day.
In his first television interview, Kuwasi Balagoon discussed his dream of a black homeland, the Republic of New Africa, that would be created from 5 southern states: Mississippi, South Carolina, Georgia, Alabama, and Louisiana. He gave up long ago on integration, calling the U.S. an evil empire, racist to the core.
A black astronaut or black Miss America or black president is not the point. We're talking about 40 million people. And if 40 million people examine the conditions that the masses of us are under, they will have to come to the conclusion that we are colonialized.
Kuwasi Balagoon has nothing but praise for his revolutionary comrades. But as for those who turn state's evidence, like Sam Brown, he says they will be dealt with as traitors.
We should have killed them. nothing else could have happened to us. But in any event, that's what should happen. And that killing was error. We should have killed him and took responsibility for it.
Balogun added there are enough people in the streets to take care of Brown and others he calls traitors if he can't. Balogun says there is no shortage of recruits or weapons. What is your feeling about suicide bombings against U.S. installations in Beirut?
I think it's beautiful. I thought that thing with the truck was incredible, when they drove the truck into the embassy. Yes, I like that, I think we have a lot to learn from them, and we will.
It is cold at Attica, a sterile, inhospitable place, even for a hardened revolutionary. But Kuwasi Balagoon is likely to spend the rest of his life here. He will not be eligible for parole until he is at least 110. Alec Roberts, Independent Network News, Attica, New York.
So that was a clip of Kuwasi Balagoon speaking in his own words, his own voice. And that clip was from Kuwasi passed away in 1986. So this is a clip of him from the 1980s. If you were in the New York area, and you no doubt saw it being played at the time on the news, it took some digging for folks to find it and to bring it to us now. And even though I don't consider myself to be the new African whisperer or the soldier whisperer, I feel it's important to give some type of context to what he was saying. Actually, this is a subject I want to explore more in a future Rootwork, talking about new African concepts of spirituality, how we incorporate African traditional religion, specifically Ifa and the Orishas, into our liberation work. But what I want to say real quick, I had on my radio show, I had a brother on a couple of months ago, good brother by the name of Askari Abdul Muntakam. And I met him when he was a student at UCLA many moons ago. And even though he was a student, he was from 8 Trey Gangster Crips out here in Los Angeles. And he maintained that relationship with his neighborhood, with his set. And during the school year he was in school, he said he went back to the set during the summer. He fell into his old ways. He ended up going off for several years, several decades for his activity. And he's out now doing, of course, different work. But we were talking one day about the mentality. These were his words, the mentality of gang members. And what he said was, some of this I'm putting into my own words. He talked about the type of energy that animates a gang member. Notice I didn't say motivate, but I said that animates a gang member. He said that same energy that animates a gang member also animates a policeman, also animates a soldier to get up in the morning, to suit up, and to walk out that door, even though they know they might not come home. That's also that same energy that will get people up and go take a life, like a soldier or a police officer. If you noticed in that clip, Kuwasi said he didn't feel anything about the people who were shot because they woke up that morning knowing they woke up that morning knowing that might happen. He said everybody was armed that day. That's the type of energy of Ogun. That is the energy that Ogun walks with, that Ogun carries, that Ogun children, Ogun people walk with. It's not just some intellectual, ideological. It's not solely ideological or intellectual. It is what animates their very being. And I want to talk about that more in depth at a future work. But real quick, before I bring in, I see you, I see you, brother Kazembe. I'm gonna get you on. Real quick, what I wanted to do. Oh, wait a minute, that's not it. It is. There we go. I wanted to read to you all, if I may, real quick. just this quick excerpt on Kuwasi, from Kuwasi. Again, in his own words. Let's see here. Uh, tell you what, let's see if we can do it this way. I'm not even seeing this. Hold on. No, I can't see it. Oh, okay. Okay, let's try it again like this. This is from Look for Me in the Whirlwind, the collective autobiography of the Panther 21. Kuwasi at the time was a member of the Black Panther Party after he left the U.S. Army, and he was one of those who had been caught up in the conspiracy of the Panther 21. He was one of the ones who was imprisoned during that time period. He was one of the ones who would be acquitted of those false trumped up charges, and afterwards he would go underground to finish his work, the work that he had started out. But Kuwasi was also a tenant organizer. It's very important to understand that many of the folks in the Black Panther Party were doing organizing work, either before they became Panthers or as they were in the Black Panther Party, dealing with the material conditions of Black people. And as a tenant organizer, it affected, just like the racism in the United States Army affected Kuwasi, seeing the conditions of our people also affected him. And so in this excerpt from the Look for Me in the Whirlwind, the collective autobiography of the Panther 21, he talks about how he found out, or he realized pretty quickly, that the court system protected slumlords. As he says, from the jump. And I found out early that a Black man in criminal court was doomed. I saw firsthand that the Brooklyn House of Detention was full of nothing but brothers and Latin brothers. The Queen 17 frame-up made my stomach turn, so I knew that all court bullshit was out. I also dug how the city government and the Creep Teachers Union tried to put a school in Brownsville, Brooklyn, out of action, taking control of the school away from the people in the area. I knew, regardless of American propaganda, that the Korean people had run across the 58th parallel and that the Vietnamese people were putting something on the real Charlie's ass. A lot of things totaled in my mind, mostly that this society puts property before people. Some sick motherfuckers are at the controls, and the very fate of humanity is at stake. Now, just this knowledge and no knowledge of how to deal with this shit has driven a lot of people crazy. Rap Brown influenced me more than anybody except for Malcolm. And by that time, I'd read Robert Williams' book Negroes with Guns and The Crusaders, which I studied along with Miles' Red Book. I decided that I wasn't doing enough, and I decided what I would be doing for the rest of my life. When I heard that Huey Newton had been involved in a shootout with two pigs and one had died, I thought I'd check this brother out, as he seemed to be a sure enough leader. And when the Panthers came to New York, I checked them out and found the 10-point program unquestionable, and the fact that it was community-based a good thing. Digging that the cadre believed that political power stems from the barrel of a gun made me feel instant kinship. So I joined and extended my energies and skills to the Black community and mankind through the party. Since then, I've been captured by the pigs, but have studied and acted to become a better man and a better revolutionary. I long to be on the streets with my people and elevate the struggle to a higher level and do whatever is necessary to bring this disgraceful period to an end. Now, this is in the late 60s as part of the Panther 21. where he writes this collective biography. You see his concern for humanity. You see his concern for the plight of the people. And even in that clip of the newscaster from the late 80s, he is begrudgingly still talking about Kuwasi's concern for the people. This is who this man was, not some bloodthirsty monster. Incidentally, a lot of times when we are reintroduced to our African traditions, a lot of times we are told that Ogun can be a very bloodthirsty hunter, soldier, warrior, etc. And again, that's something that I want to go into in a future Rootwork. So that I can, let's see here. I want to, let me, well, let me, our guest has been waiting so patiently throughout all of that madness. Let me bring on Kazembe Balagoon. And I want, Kazembe, are you there? Yes, you're there. It looks like you're there. How you doing, bro?
Hi, good afternoon. Can you hear me?
I can hear you. I wish I could make, wish I could make your photo is not as big as it should be. I want people to see you, and hopefully they'll be able to hear your words. But my apologies to you, brother. I was doing a lot of things today, and I did not write up a proper introduction for you. But I believe when I have a guest on, the guests should speak for themselves. For those Rootwork viewers, those Black Power Media viewers who may not be familiar with who you are, can you please give us an introduction to you?
Absolutely, certainly, and thank you so much for having the show, and thank you so much for your wonderful context you put Quasi Balagoon's life in. My name is Kazembe Balagoon. I am based here in New York City, specifically the Bronx. I was born in Harlem. Um, I've been active in social movements and movements for revolutionary change since I was 16 years old. Grew up in the Polo Grounds housing projects. Was part of the cadre for different Marxist organizations, and ultimately, members, was a part of a, you know, uh, Black liberation work starting when I went to college and to college. Um, some of your listeners might remember me from my work as a program coordinator and as outreach coordinator for the Breck Forum, which was a cultural center in the West Village. And subsequently after that, I did some work with the Rosa Luxemburg Stiftung, which was a organization, did international work. But mostly I'm known as a writer. I'm a cultural activist, philosopher. My background is in the movement toward Black liberation. And a lot of the work around Quasi Balagoon has been, based on my research, but also like, into really deep personal relationships that I've had with, surviving members of the Black Liberation Army and the Black Panther Party that has, talked deeply about Quasi's impact on their work, which is personal for me. I'm also bisexual. I'm also, same gender loving, um, and a member of the Black Liberation Movement. So certainly, we'll get into this, a little bit later on. But Quasi's life, like you mentioned, is very like, it's almost like if you can like, if there was like a Marvel, universe character that you could create, like Quasi would probably be like the archetype of one. Somebody like Shanti mentioned, numerous times broke out of prison, broke others out of prison. Was a fierce street organizer and tenant organizer, as you mentioned, but it was also queer and same gender loving
Well, hold
in a
on.
time when
Before we get into
yeah
that, before we get into
yeah
the bulk of that conversation, let me just say real quick. This is the cover of "Look for Me in the Whirlwind." The book was the book was reissued. It was updated, and it was edited by Dequi Kiani Siddiqui and
hmm
Matt Meyer. Um,
right
In addition to being an activist in her own right, Sister Dekwe is currently married to Baba Sekou Odinga. So this
Right.
new version of "Look for Me in the Whirlwind" has a forward by Imam Jamil Alameen, formerly H. Rap Brown, and an
Right.
afterword by Mumia Abu Jamal. There's a piece in here that I might get to at some point, but I also wanted to state. Let's see here. Oh, okay. Well, there you have it. So this is a soldier story. This is put out, has been put out by Kersplebeder Books and AK Press Distribution. Revolutionary Writings by a New African Anarchist. So the also edited by Matt Meyer and Carl Kersplebeder. Kersplebeder is up in Canada. They've been very, very supportive of movements, anti-imperialist movements, and the New African Independence Movement. They've published the last book by Sanyika Shakur. So Kuwasi, I always get his name mixed up. Kuwasi there are remnants of him all around, letters he has written to people, essays that he's written. And as Ashanti was talking about in the clip, a lot of the works that had been coming out, he in the beginning or at some point thought that they were attributed to Deruba, but he believes that they were either influenced by or actually written by Kuwasi. This is the
Right.
trial statement for the Brinks. There it is. This was one of the first pamphlets that had been put out after Kuwasi passed away. Trial statement of New African Revolutionary Kuwasi Balagoon at the opening of the Brinks trial. You can find that out there on the web also. And the trial statement, my understanding is that the judge cut him off and would not let him finish the statement. However, he continued. It was already written and it was circulated amongst folks. I had one more photo I wanted to show real quick, but let me do this also because again, I'm trying to let's see, trying to do what I can to give an idea, to give an indication, an indicator of this brother's depth. Now, this is the first time we hear the title, "A Soldier Story: The Making of a Revolutionary New African Freedom Fighter." This is a tribute to Kuwasi Balagoon that was put together by the New African People's Organization a few days after he passed away in 1986. This is available online
Mm.
from the Freedom Archives. Shout out to Claude Marks and the crew at the Freedom Archives. Chokwe Lumumba made comments, Nkichi Taifa, David Gilbert, the father of former San Francisco DA Chesa Boudin, who David Gilbert was just released from his prison sentence at some point last year. But very, very briefly, this is one of the drawings that Kuwasi did. I want to read to you this statement that Kuwasi sent to the New African Freedom Fighters Day in 1983. So he's already been captured. Revolutionary greetings, brothers and sisters. On the third anniversary of New African Freedom Fighters Day, I'd like to extend my feelings of comradeship and optimism that the government of the United States or any government has the right to control the lives of New African people is absurd and has no basis in principled reason or justice or common decency. Only New African people should govern New African people in the manner that we collectively as a people deem correct. This being so, and that on top of forcing us to live as a colonialized people, the government of the United States has been and is practicing genocide against us. It is our right, duty, and natural inclination to defend ourselves and provide for the safety and well being of our people. As Marcus Garvey stated, we cannot leave the fate of our people to chance. The necessity of building a people's army to carry out armed struggle and a mass movement to build the infrastructure for the superseding society must be explained to the masses of our people. We must organize this, our army and our total revolution, along principled lines that will deliver us as a people to land ample enough to support our population in order to obtain our self-determination. It is either liberation and self-determination for us as a people or more colonial degradation and genocide. These are the choices. Now, I'm going to stop there. Again, that's from the memorial program after Baba Kuwasi passed away. It's a letter he wrote in 1983, and that's available on the uh, Freedom Archives website. I want to stress that this is a person deeply concerned with humanity. You don't necessarily get that from that clip where the guy just out of the blue asked Kuwasi Balagoon, so what you think about all the Marines that was blown up in Lebanon? I don't even know why he threw that in there. But I'm not going to condemn him too much. That's what colonial mainstream media does. But at the same time, we would not have Kuwasi, in his own words, if it had not been for that, right? So I appreciate the fact that that clip even exists. Now,
Um,
oh, yes, sir.
yeah, so I wanted to maybe just kind of jump into that real quickly.
Okay.
And I think that it's important. I think it's important because, I think the clip comes at a time in the 1980s when like the movements for liberation in the 1960s were largely defeated.
Mm-hmm.
Many of our leaders were assassinated.
Right.
Fred Hampton, Marvin King, Michael Knox, many of the Panthers were assassinated or in exile, like Asada Shakur. And so at that time, there was a big crowing, and there was also the onset of the Reagan Revolution, right? Which was saying that, all the things that we dreamed about in the 1960s, all the dreams around African decolonization, around black liberation, around women's liberation, around gay liberation, were to be kind of closed off from our horizon. And then you have someone like Crazy, who's vocally, right, speaking, like, saying that I'm in support of armed struggle, right? And he's continuing what I would say is a very Fanonian response to colonialization, right? And Fanon would say that the violence is a cleansing force of the oppressed against the oppressor, right? And so that's what Crazy is holding on to, even in his words, utilize his language against colonialization. But I would also say that, oftentimes that the same tools of decolonization
Mm-hmm.
are there's different tools for liberation,
Mm-hmm.
right? And I think that that's where Crazy's life and legacy comes in, because I think that he was trying to live a life of liberation, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I think beyond, like you said, beyond the rhetorical violence, his vision was one of liberation for all of
Mm-hmm.
humanity, right? You know what I'm saying? And this is very funny. If you read a book like The Wretched of the Earth, which I know a lot of the listeners on here have read,
Uh-huh.
the book starts off with concerning violence, but
Oh,
it
now,
ends
wait a minute.
with,
Did I'm sorry.
well, wait, I'm sorry. Please let me finish, because
Okay.
you brought me on as a guest, and so I'm going to do
Absolutely.
my guest thing, and
Right.
and I'm going to show my expertise with the audience, and so I need to like not be interrupted every 5 minutes.
Okay.
And so hold your question for a second and let me finish. Um, but what I would say is that it's very important in terms of that reading of violence that we also have the idea around liberation, and that the healing from violence is also very important too, right? And I think that that's what Crazy's life was about, right? Crazy's life was about joy and liberation in the face of all that which we're having, which includes all sides of Crazy's life too, which includes his queerness, and includes his saying, and ultimately also includes the fact that he was a victim of the AIDS epidemic as well.
Mm-hmm. Were you finished, sir?
Yep, Faye.
Oh, okay.
Yes, absolutely.
I was jumping in because I didn't. I hope that I did not miscommunicate and make people think that I was quote unquote either glorifying mindless violence or that I was insinuating that Kuwasi was about that type of violence. I was hoping that I made it clear that this is a man who loves humanity and was committed to defending and freeing humanity by any means necessary. That's what I was hoping I got across.
Absolutely. And you are loud and clear, but I think it's very important that we both be clear to our audience because oftentimes, whenever violence is used by the oppressed, right, it's oftentimes seen as a bad thing, right?
Correct. Hmm.
And we have to put it in its proper context. I think it's very funny that that we're having this conversation now when like lots of black folks have been woken up to, this whole type thing that happened in Montgomery, which is a whole other story. The Montgomery boat incident, where like black people are defending themselves, and the majority of our people are like, yeah, that's you have a right to defend ourselves. And this is the context of which that I think that we're coming back to resolve in the face of fascism in the United States, which is something that really also drove Crazy's politic, right? That
Hmm.
Crazy's politic was also driven by the very fact that he was very much understood that in his own personal life, right, as someone who grew up under the terror of bayonets and the National Guard during the Cambridge protests that were led by Gloria Williams,
Richardson.
that Richardson, excuse me, Gloria Richardson, right? Thank you so much, Gloria Richardson. To his own experiences as an army soldier, as you mentioned, to a tenant organizer, into the Black Panther Party, and remember the Black Panther 21. He always had to deal with the idea, the notion of the law, right, being down his neck, right, and so Quasi's rhetorical style is informed by that, and I think that there's something that we should not jump and say feel like offended by, but we should really kind of like you did so beautifully dig deeper into his words. And the last thing I want to say about these words is very interesting for me is that as somebody who was like um I was a big fan of Encyclopedia Brown when I was a kid, and I consider myself a queer historian. And what I loved about this what I wrote about what I wrote about him 14 years ago was the fact that I got to dig deep into some of his words and to be able to really like recreate and re-archive this man, that was really erased from history. Because by the time I heard of him, and I heard of him through Ashanti, and doing a conversation that I had with Ashanti, that I had never seen anything in my history books about a queer person, much less, a queer panther in the pantheons of our resistance movements. And I think that has a lot to say about, our relationship to queerness and our relationship to like LGBT communities, which I'm hoping we can get into a little bit later on today too.
Hmm. I I want to state also that as of I'm not sure how long ago it was, but within the last at least within the last 10 years, Baba Akinyele Umoja, historian, professor at Georgia State University in Atlanta, frequent guest here, has also written about Kuwasi Balagoon, and that is available out there in the world. Well, actually, I saw his art. It's called Maroon, Kuwasi Balagoon, and the Evolution of Revolutionary New African Anarchism. It was like a 26-page essay that was in some journal, but it has been reprinted in a soldier's story, along with the other writings of Kuwasi, along with other people's writings on Kuwasi. So look for me in the Whirlwind, trial statement of Kuwasi Balagoon, which is probably in uh, a soldier's story. Those are two works that at least two works that people need to be familiar with.
And
This one is
I will also include Jasmine Gibson's essay on lineage that she's a young sister who wrote for a feminist magazine on Quasi Balagoon as well. I mean, I think that and I think that the question I have for you is why do you think there's so much conversation in chatter around Quasi's life now, particularly? Why now? Why are people talking about Crazy?
Hmm. I think they're talking about him because he is a model of a hero, basically. And he's a hero to different communities for different reasons. He's a hero to those who favor more militant action, i.e., his armed actions. He is a hero to those students and fans of the Black Panther Party, Black Liberation Army, Panther 21. He is a hero to the queer or same gender loving community. He is a hero to the anarchist community. All of these different communities that are sometimes either purposefully or not separate are brought together in this one individual's life. And we see how they exist pretty, I'm assuming, because I didn't know the brother, I'm assuming effortlessly. That's what it's looking like. But I think that that might be one of the reasons why. I'm not sure, but that's what I think. Oh, I
I
think you
think
get
it's,
you
no,
were
I think
mute.
that's no, I think, no, I think no, I think you're absolutely great. I mean, I think that's yeah, absolutely, and that's something that I think a lot of us are will all kind of contending with as well.
So, real quick, I also wanted to mention this book because after I first learned and heard about Kuwasi and his exploits, I came across this book. And if I can just get nostalgic for a minute, I lived in Washington, D.C. for 4 years. Shout out to the DMV. Shout out to Go Go in the Pocket. Um, there was a bookstore in DuPont Circle called Common Concerns. Common Concerns was my second home. Maybe I'll just do a show on this bookstore one day. Anyway, not to take up too much time, but Common Concerns had books, periodicals, everything from all over the world. But when you first walk into the store, they would have a sale table. And I never could understand how that worked. Hundreds, scores, not hundreds, scores, dozens of books would be marked down, not even half price. I remember getting There Is a River for $2.98. What? Okay. I walk into Common Concerns one day and hardback copies of The Big Dance, the untold story of weatherman Kathy Boudin and the terrorist family that committed the Brinks robbery murders, are on the table for like, I think, $4.98. I was familiar with this title because I want to say it was either in Agents of Repression or the COINTELPRO papers. But at any rate, I was familiar with the title because of those other books. I walk into the bookstore and here it is, and it's on sale. I must have scooped up like 10 copies. I still have my original copies and passed them out to people. This book is now, if you look on the web, eBay, even Amazon, it's between $50 and $200 now because it's out of print. But in going through this book, this is where I got um, the first comments or the first not indication. This was the first place I read that said that Kuwasi was bisexual. That when he had been apprehended in the home of his quote unquote old lady, who I believe the words they used at the time was a transsexual. Today we would call her a trans woman. And I was like, what? I had never heard of that before. Now, again, because we're living, however many years after Kwesi has passed, so many other people are talking about, yes, this was who he was, this was his sexuality, this is a part of who he was, but it wasn't no big thing. The other people knew him as a soldier who loved humanity, who was there for his comrades, even as Ashanti talked about. Oh, y'all locked up? What can we do to help get you out? Because I've broken myself out of prison. I'll help get you out too. That's the kind of brother that he was. And so now this is written from a journalist who covered. I see we have lost Kazembe. He'll be back. This was written by a journalist who covered the Brinks trial as it was happening. So this is going to be based on court testimony and trial transcripts from the court, and also, of course, police reports. How many of our people that he interviewed, I have no idea, but it doesn't matter. There's a way that you can sift through the various information that is in the book. And this book is a source of information. It's a source of misinformation if you don't have any other context, but hopefully through the writings of people such as Kazembe Balagoon and Black Power Media, you will share this with people so that we will be able to take you through these types of sources, point out the misinformation. Now, as I wait for as I wait for Kazembe to get back, I want to, as I said, this was the first place I had seen anything mentioned about Kuwasi sexuality. The next place I saw it was this article, this essay that Kazembe wrote in the year 2006, when Kuwasi would have been 60 years of age. And it's Kuwasi at 60. Now, I could start reading this. I'm hoping I didn't run the brother off. I'm hoping Kazembe comes back. So let me start this. Let's see if I can. Hopefully the screen is big enough. Hopefully the screen is big enough for y'all to see. If not, this essay is on the anarchistlibrary.org website. On December 16, 2006, over 75 people gathered at Lava in West Philadelphia. The crowd was a mix of Black Liberation Movement veterans, young and old, anarchist punks, and white queer activists from ACT UP. They came together to pay homage to the late Kuwasi Balagoon, who would have turned 60 years old this year. Balogun is not an immediately recognizable name in the pantheon of revolutionaries, yet he has developed into an underground hero 20 years after his death. This is due in large part to the maze of contradictions that constructed Balogun's life. Now, again, this was written in 2006. The words that Kazembe used are a maze of contradictions. I might use another way to describe it. The point being, as I said a minute ago, all of these different movements, all of these different tendencies, which usually we see as separate, which are many times kept separate on purpose, they come together in this brother's life. So I'm not seeing Kazembe back in terms of his connection. So why don't we do this? Let's go back over here and let's read some more, shall we? Thank you, Zen, for saying that you can see it. Oh, my bad. No, that's not. That ain't it. Hold on. Hold on. Let's see. Early life. He was born Donald Weems in Lakeland, Maryland. He was born, and of course, Donald Weems, he enlisted in the military. He gets out of the military, joins the Panther Party, becomes a tenant organizer. But while he was in the military, I don't think we talked about this. I don't think we mentioned this. But this is in Kazembe's essay, and it also goes into, it comes from Look for Me in the Whirlwind, which is where Kuwasi had written his autobiographical statement. He says he was a member of this group called the Delegislators. This was a little collective of brothers in the army who handled racist officers in the army. We've seen numerous war films. Not enough of those war films talk about what Black, Puerto Rican, other soldiers of color did to their officers for their racism. I think Platoon was the first film, not that I'm a war historian, mind you. I think Platoon with Charlie Sheen was the first film I saw where a soldier fragged his commanding officer, the officer above him, because he was just such an asshole. But that was happening a lot during the Vietnam War. He talks about here, every time white GIs ganged the black GI, we moved to more than even the score. One at a time, we would catch up with them and beat and stomp them so bad that helicopters would have to be used to take them to better hospitals in the area. Afterward, we would have critiques, just like in the end of war games, get our alibis together, and keep the whole thing under our hats. With the delegislators as an example, Latino and Asian soldiers also began to rebel. This ushered in a new respect for soldiers of color and struck fear into the heart of the brass. So again, this is part of Kazembe's essay, which we find at the anarchist library called Kuwasi at 60. He also talks about Kuwasi becoming a Panther, his stint in the Black Liberation Army, which he joins after the acquittal of the Panther 21, the Brinks robbery. The Brinks robbery was one expropriation of funds that was conducted by Kuwasi and others. A previous one, a prior one, had been used to get the funds necessary to get Assata Shakur out of prison. I don't think Kuwasi was actually, quote unquote, militarily involved in freeing Assata, but he definitely had a hand in, it appears, the discussions and other actions to get that comrade out of prison. He talks about Kuwasi as an anarchist and, of course, as queer. One of the silences that engulfed Kuwasi's life was his bisexuality. The official eulogies offered by the New African People's Organization and others omitted his sexuality or that he died of AIDS-related complications. These erasures are a reflection of the ongoing internal struggle against homophobia and patriarchy within the larger society in general and in the movement in particular. The Black liberation movement has had a complex relationship with the question of sexuality. Black people's sexuality has always been defined from the outside. In the media, Black men and women are portrayed as sexual deviants. As such, protecting the image of Black people as firmly masculine and feminine was a project of much of the Black liberation movement. Adding fuel to the fire is the inroads by conservatives, particularly the Christian right, in creating a wedge between Black, feminist, and queer movements. The Christian right's moves have manifested in a number of ways, from accusing queers of benefiting from the Black blood spilled in the civil rights movement to the myth of the down low brother infecting Black women with AIDS. That is still a point of contention for a lot of folks. Of course, homophobia is a cover for a larger push for forcing traditional family structures, including condemnation of single-family households. Since the Moynihan Report of the 1960s, actually, that linked Black oppression to the pathologies of single mothers, money has flooded people of color communities from faith-based initiatives encouraging abstinence instead of safe sex and forcing single mothers to marry the fathers of their children in order to receive benefits. One of the things that we know about white supremacy, it never has and it never will condemn itself. In other words, the reason why Black folks are suffering is not because of white supremacy, not because of the legacies of enslavement, not because of colonialism, it's because of Black women. And we have many within our communities to this day, right now, today, some of whom might be in the chat, who blame Black women or who think that Black women are the reason for the ills in the Black community. They think that, they just ain't had the heart enough to type it in the chat, because I know Zinzabel be looking for folk like that. At any rate, I see Brother Kazembe has not rejoined us. I know I had him on forever. His Internet had been acting up from the beginning. So we do appreciate him for coming on for the time that he did come on. I apologize. I know somebody said, stop apologizing, Tandy. So I'm going to apologize for apologizing so much. Technical difficulties. I'm still the um, learning the ropes on how to present to you all. Has some serious technical difficulties in the beginning, but it gets better. It gets better. So again, Kuwasi at 60. This is an essay written in 2006, 20 years after Kuwasi Balagoon passed away. That's available at the anarchistlibrary.org. You've got the big dance. If you want to put out money for that, go right ahead. I don't think it's been placed into scanned as a as a PDF just yet, but it's out there. Definitely get the reissue of Look for Me in the Whirlwind, collective biography of the Panther 21. Definitely get A Soldier's Story, the writings of Kuwasi Balagoon. See what his comrades, his contemporaries have said about him, and see his own writings for yourself. Read his own writings for yourself and see the humanity that, if I may take some license here, the the writing license, see the humanity that exudes onto the page. See the love that Kuwasi Balagoon has to end the suffering of not just black people, but of all people. I'm reminded of a quote by our brother, the upright man, Thomas Sankara. A soldier without any political education is a criminal, is a thug. Kuwasi Balagoon does not fit that. There's no way you could, only the colonial media would call him a thug. He was a true soldier. He served in Uncle Sam's army and he served in our army and he fought for our people. He was a revolutionary. He was an absolute soldier for the people. We can learn from his example. And when those of us in revolutionary black nationalist circles, when we praise Kuwasi Balagoon, when we praise his example, understand the fullness of this righteous, unfearing, courageous soldier who took it to the enemy, that there were sides to him. All of these parts made up this whole, the anarchist part as well as his sexuality. Our sexuality is not something that we keep over here in the corner. It's part of who we are, who we be. And if his comrades knew who he was and respected him and did not try to shun him or shut him off because of his sexuality, and we see the work that they were engaged in, who are we as above ground activists to shun brothers and sisters because of their sexuality? First of all, human rights for all human beings. Second of all, African people have an absolute right to struggle for their freedom, to be involved in the struggle for their freedom. So who are we to say to those brothers who are same gender loving or queer or bisexual or trans or whatever to say that you cannot struggle? Who are we? Excuse me. Who are y'all to make that statement? Thirdly, fourthly, A, B, C, D, whichever number, I done lost track. We ain't got the numbers. We ain't got time to be picking people out, kicking people out. No, you can, okay, you over here. This ain't no schoolyard basketball team. Okay, I'm gonna pick you. I'm gonna pick you. No, not you. Y'all done lost y'all damn minds. But at any rate, I'm not up here to preach today. I was hoping I could come up here and not even teach, just share. And because I don't see my brother, coming back on screen. Not sure what happened to him. I'm wondering if I should sneak over to the chat. Should I creep into the chat because y'all, it be shootouts in the chat. Blood and bodies be, ooh, smoke. And I don't want, I'm nonviolent. I don't want to have nothing to do with that. But I'm going to tiptoe over here real quick. I'm here to say the things Dondi is way too diplomatic to say. That's Zinzabel, in case y'all didn't know. I'm going to tip over here to this chat and see what y'all are talking about over here. Let's see. Tell him again. Okay. Well, it wasn't my intention to preach, but I just thought, I'd say a little something, something. But at any rate, this is what I wanted to talk about during Black August. This is why we call it study and struggle. It's going to be uncomfortable. You ain't going to like some things. But so what? It has to be done. And if these brothers and sisters, political prisoners, prisoners of war, exiles, if they can do all the things that they did, face what they faced, oh, come on now. We can't have some struggle over ideas. We can't have some discussions. We can't walk away clearer and more determined in terms of what we need to do to free our people. I'm just saying. Thank you, Desiree, for tuning in. Appreciate you. Absolutely. Black Power Media is necessary. Black Power Media need to give me a proper orientation so I don't be jacking up. Okay, I'm gonna stop. I'm gonna stop criticizing. I'm gonna keep the criticism for internal. Black Power Media. You think it was a big deal that comrades embraced Kuwasi Balagoon like that behind the walks or the walls? We mostly used to people put the prohibition on. Okay, I'm going to, not quite sure what you were trying to say, but appreciate you for being here, for watching, and for sharing. I've come to a serious consensus. There's so much division within the African community on how to struggle. Of course, there's division. And that's one of the reasons why we have study and struggle. How do we move forward? Like I mentioned the other day, I think it was last week, I forget when it was. I mentioned it to somebody. It's all running together now. I don't remember anymore. John Henry Clark was asked by Barbara Ransby his remembrances of Ella Baker. And he said Ella would have an argument, ideological argument with you, be in the room with you all night in your face. And the next morning, if she saw you on the street or Harlem street, she would jaywalk, stop traffic, brave getting hit by a car to cross the street to give you a hug. And the hug was not despite or in spite of the argument. It was because of the argument. She understood struggle. She understood ideological struggle. She understood who her comrades were in this struggle. If you haven't read Barbara Ransby's a biography of Ella Baker, you need to read it. You need to find, maybe it's here on YouTube, Fundi, Story of Ella Baker. Fundi is a Kiswahili word which means teacher, master teacher. It is the name that Bob Moses and other young folks in the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee gave to Ella Baker because of her wealth of knowledge and her ability to share and train organizers to find their own voice. She said that strong people don't need leaders. Strong people do not need leaders. This is what Ella Baker taught. This is how she operated her life, understanding that there's a struggle and we need everyone in this struggle. So if you haven't read her book, Barbara Ransby's biography on Ella Baker, check it out. Look for the video called Fundi on Ella Baker. It's out there somewhere. A lot of these are on VHS tapes. Hopefully they will become digitized where you can either download them onto your computers or onto your smart TVs, or be put into DVD format for those of us who still got that technology. Let's see. Hey, Sugar Booger, appreciate you. I'll be up in here quoting Samuel L. Jackson. What's that about? You are welcome, Brother Chris. The point is not for me to get up here and just run my mouth. The point is for me to share with you all, again, so we can study and struggle, get clarity on some things, get some agreement on some things, and hopefully become motivated to move on some things. So, I got 416. I have not heard back from the brother. Not sure where he is or what's going on. And I think that, yeah, those were all, I got to all the slides, all the screenshots, all the references that I wanted to get to today. So it's that time, y'all. It's that time for me to dip out. I want to thank you so much for joining us today. I'm going to try it again next week. Please, Lord, sweet baby black Jesus, Rumalai Larry Peen, ancestors Orishas, please let me not have no technical difficulties next week. Amen, Ashe. We're going to try it again next week, and we'll be talking about Safia Bukhari, Lioness for Liberation, on our Black August Study and Struggle series. Every Thursday, 3 p.m. Pacific, 6 p.m. East Coast time, here on Rootwork on Black Power Media. So thank you once again for tuning in. Please like, please subscribe, please share this video. You can even leave some comments for folks to come back later on. We appreciate you for hanging with us. I know I appreciate you for hanging with me. And with that, peace. Stay safe.